Welcome to Sluggo, a college football podcast and show featuring Casey, the Beef, Cregan, and Marty, seldom used reserve Coleman. We'll bring you the best of all the goings on in the world of college football and beyond and bring you a little bit into our lives. Yes, the fastest growing podcast and show on the internet is on. This is Sluggo, show number 2. Casey, the Beef, Cregan, how are you doing on this fine evening?
It is awesome to be back here, show number 2. We're ready. What a great response we got to show number 1. I never would have imagined how many clicks and views we got from it, and we didn't even hardly know what we were talking about. But it's great to be back with you, Marty, and I'm ready to go, man. We got a lot of information to talk about this week.
Yeah, it was a great first show. Over 800 views and listens combined with all the platforms we're on. In case the folks out there didn't know, we were on Facebook, YouTube, and also there's a podcast version. But, you know, if you like video, you're not going to like our faces very much, but there'll be graphics interspersed into this video, some of the things we're going to talk about. Hey, I learned something over the week, Case, and that's how to put graphics on top of the video so they don't have to see our face for an hour straight. How about that?
That's great. I know I love your background, your backdrops there. We have some things, your interesting jar, your shirt there. If I knew what to do with myself and didn't have my setup the way it was, I'd probably have some interesting stuff back here as well. So we'll work it out. It's a work in progress, no question, but we'll bring it to you.
No doubt the goal is to improve every week, and hopefully by college football season, we'll, have some more viewers and listeners. Hey, by the way, you brought up that jar with that name that I won't say because there's $3 in that jar. I went back and listened to the tape as I promised, and actually when I was saying it, it came out again. So there's actually $3 in the jar. And for those of you who didn't listen last week, every time I say that word that Casey called that jar, I'm putting $1 in there because it's really a bad habit of mine of saying that word over and over. As Casey's mentioned, everybody has those, right? Even the pros have those things they say over and over to fill time. That's mine, trying to make a good thing out of it. Though I guess if I was trying to make a good thing, I'd say it a lot so the charity would get a lot of money.
They may anyway, though, but it's okay. It's all right. It's trying to get better, and we have many things going on with this show that we will be donating hopefully a whole bunch of money to charities of our choice and different charities. I know we've already discussed some of them. We'll get into that later on as the season gets going. But so there's going to be money to be had by some of these great charities.
Good deal. Good deal. Hey, I think it's a requirement of every podcast and show these days to start off about talking about COVID-19. And since we last got together, well, when we were talking last week, the teams were starting to roll back into their towns. And since we last got together, Houston came together, the Houston Cougars came together and then shut it down after 6 players tested positive. Ohio State's players signed a waiver, also known as the Buckeye Pledge. Boy, we could talk about that for weeks, how they framed that one out. Clemson actually had a couple players test positive. And you let me know today, Kansas State adds 4 into that mix. I haven't seen any others, but I haven't been looking. Maybe I'm trying to close my eyes over the whole topic. How you feeling about this, Beef?
Every time I look at social media, whether it's Twitter, ESPN.com, Facebook, whatever, it's another school that's adding to the list. So every day that goes by, I need something to lift me up that leads me to believe that there's going to be a college football season. And what a change from last week, where everyone was moving forward and everyone's back on campus and the excitement's there and kids are getting excited. You can feel it. You can see it on the Twitter box. It's fantastic. But man, oh man, with every day and every new school, even though it's 4, 6, 2, 1, whatever it may be, it's there. And then the numbers that are coming out of the southern states, that they're rising. I saw something today that your state of Texas has had the most hospitalizations for normal people in 2 weeks was today or yesterday or this week maybe. I don't know exactly what it was, but South Carolina is going through an influx. Florida is too. I know I told my wife many months ago, I guess now, The South is behind us 2 weeks, but it may have been 2 months behind us here in the Northeast. So I just don't have a good feeling. I went actually and visited our friend Heather Dinich on ESPN.com, and she wrote a great article today, or yesterday actually, talking about what needs to be done. And there's still a lot of things, and they're still in flux. And the great quote that I saw was from the athletic director of Florida, Scott Strickland. He said, "Predict nothing and prepare for everything." And I think that's pretty much what we're seeing here. I don't have good hopes for this football season. And I need to caveat that because I know there's going to be some semblance of football played. But as far as a full, even a 10-game season, I just don't see it happen. This article goes on to say, what happens if a school, let's say Texas Tech is playing Texas, okay, for whatever reason. Texas Tech has a bunch of students that catch it. Not necessarily football players, but a bunch of students. They send everybody home. Well, then they're shut down for the week. They're shut down for that week. The football team can't play. School's shut down, blah, blah, blah. Now Texas plays nobody. So how is that going to add into the season? Like, do they get a win for forfeit? I just want this thing to go away, Marty.
Yeah, well, it's going to be strange. What happens if somebody plays 12 games and another school plays 5? Or
which could happen.
Yeah, which absolutely could happen. Or as I mentioned, you wake up Friday morning, Trevor Lawrence isn't feeling good, and he's got COVID-19, and so now you're faced playing with a quarterback that hasn't played all year. It's going to be crazy. But let me give you some good news.
Please do.
I heard, and this was me looking into, my son's going into high school next year. A lot of things I'll say, folks, will revolve around having a 13-year-old entering high school next year. So he's going to high school next year. And I heard a doctor on a podcast earlier this week say 99.98% of fatalities from COVID-19 are from people over 18 years of age. Now, very happy. My son's only 13, and that means he's likely safe, at least from dying, right? And I realize players in college football are over 18, but they're not that much over 18. So I am hopeful that the players that have it now, for instance, and the ones that will get it in between now and the season will be able to recover, and there'll be some semblance of a season. I also don't think the ramifications, I think we've calmed down on the ramifications of getting this. It's not a death sentence. I think some of those numbers were overblown in the beginning. We know how the models were way off. Interestingly enough, some of them are now claiming victory because people are still dying from it. But I guess to me, it's not as scary as it was in March. Not saying it's not serious, not saying you can't die from it. I'm just saying it's a different feeling when someone tests positive now than it was in March. That may be a dangerous thing to say about a doctor, but that's my current feeling.
No, I think it was a fear of the unknown type of thing in March. We didn't know. All of a sudden, I have friends that are doctors and friends' wives that are doctors, and one of them told me that it was like a war zone, except everyone that was coming into the emergency room was dying. So it was that serious here in the Northeast where they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what the treatment was, excuse me. But I think now that they have a better grasp of it, there's still no necessary treatment, but they are able to treat it, if that makes any sense. I really think that's what it's going to take here. It's not going to take people. Someone told me the other day there's no money in the cure. So that's a big thing that, makes you think a little bit. But there is money in treatment. And so you hope that comes quick.
Well, there's money. Yes, there's money in treatment. There's money in a vaccine too, if it comes to that. So,
right.
And a little bit more good news, Casey. My friend,
yes,
my old friend from the Pit Boss Sauce Company messaged me on Instagram yesterday and said he had a picture, and it was a picture of a receipt for your Pit Boss sauce. How's that working out?
I got it in the mail today. I was so excited. You should have seen me jumping up and down when this thing came in. I had some great barbecue sauce last night at a friend of mine's house. Then I opened this thing up and I saw it said real big letters. It said Pit Boss Sauce. And I was like, yeah. I ruffled through those little popcorn things that come in the packaging. Very well packaged. Thank you, Turjay. It's awesome. I opened the cap. I spilled a little bit on my fingers, so I had to lick it off, and it's delicious. So I can't wait to put it on something. I already ate dinner tonight, unfortunately, and I didn't pick up my mail till about 4:30. But I'm ready. I'm ready for it tomorrow. I'm going to maybe do some chicken, maybe some ribs. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but I'm going to have this sauce. So I can't wait. So thank you so much. Really appreciate Pit Boss Sauce.
Yeah, it was a good deal. And my wife and I were talking earlier this afternoon. We're going to the Salt Lake on Sunday for Father's Day. That's going to be her Father's Day present. And I was like, oh, I got just the thing for that Salt Lake barbecue. Because I love their barbecue and the brisket and the ribs. Oh, the ribs are great. Don't so much like the sauce, but the Pit Boss, as I said last week, has the Carolina sweet heat that he sent to me, has just enough tinge, adds flavor. I'm not a big hot sauce guy. I am a pansy when it comes to hot stuff. I never understood, by the way, guys who eat all that hot stuff and sweat while they're eating. It just doesn't look like fun to me. So
not enjoyable. No, sir.
Not enjoyable. Hey, I want to do one thing. We had a good response to episode 1. We had over 800 views on all the platforms, as I said, which is more than either of us could ever imagine. I was like texting beef for you guys out there going, hey, we're at 300, we're at 400, we're at 500. And it felt so great and so gratifying, but we got a long ways to go and a lot of improvement to make. But I wanted to shout out the folks who gave us a like on Facebook, and they are Sean Floyd, Brian David Lee, that's one person, not three, Barry Reinhart, Ernie Greenwood, and some names that I see a lot on the stuff that I post on Seldom Used Reserve. These last two, Brian Hutto and Kevron Harris. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for supporting us. We hope you like show number 2 as much as you apparently enjoyed show number 1.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening. We appreciate you. And please let us know if there's something you want to hear, something you want us to discuss, and anything that we can do better. We'll accept it. Constructive criticism is welcome.
No doubt. And that reminds me, great segue there, Beef. The Anchor app, if you have that, you can actually send us a message and we can play it on the show through the Anchor app. Very simple to download and use. So anchor.fm. And that's not a plug. That's just a fact. Hey, Beef, I was trolling through ESPN earlier this week, and I came across an article about the Tier 1 football jobs. And Clemson has strived to be on these kind of lists forever and ever. And I thought it was a real interesting article. To be a Tier 1 job, you have to have great location with excellent access to elite regional and national recruits, strong infrastructure and commitment from the university and the athletic administration, few financial limitations. Of course, that may have changed recently. Everybody's got financial limitations this year. Few financial limitations on assistant coach and staff hires, and a history as a top 5 program, either recent or long term. Here's the Tier 1. And this is an ESPN Plus article, which I'm not a member of, so I could only read the first little bit. But the teams they have on Tier 1 are Alabama, Clemson, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. What do you think about that list?
Basically, I know that people throw around the phrase blue bloods all the time and blue bloods forever. That seems to be the recent blue bloods is what you see there in Tier 1. Now, I know Alabama has been there forever. They had some off years there when Mike Shula was in there. And even Nick Saban's first year, they struggled a little bit, but once he was there and set there, and no financial limitations there with getting assistant coaches and recruiting, and they recruit nationally. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer to be on the top. Obviously, Clemson, they've worked their tail off to get up to where they are now. They are recruiting nationally. They continually have been recently anyway getting kids from California, Kansas, wherever they want, they seem to be able to go and get. Florida has always kind of been there. I would put them kind of on the fringe, though. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. They recruit, but they are sitting in Florida. If they get the top tier Florida kids, they're going to be okay. They're going to be 8-9 wins, I think. Georgia, yeah, obviously. LSU, Ohio State is another one. Good night. They go everywhere in the country, too, to get whoever the heck they want, too. They're going to be around forever, and they've been, history-wise, they've been a true blue blood as well. And Oklahoma's doing a great job with Lincoln Riley. So I have nothing negative about any of those teams with the exception of maybe Florida.
That's an interesting take. Florida, yeah, they've underachieved to me over the last 7 or 8 years, I guess. I would say, without looking at their record and the history, just as, off the top of my head. The one I had a question about might surprise you, though. It's LSU. What do you think about LSU? Here's my take. They always say that LSU, and they have access to Texas for sure. They have a lot of Texas guys on their roster. Not as many as you might think, but I'm leery of saying LSU is a current blue blood or tier one. Now that may change with Coach O. Obviously, he recruits nationally, and he's doing a great job recruiting. My point here is, I did a little research when I saw this, and I thought all these teams have something in common, right? They're in fertile recruiting ground or close to it. As they said, access to elite talent. Guess what my research showed? You know how many top 250 players, using the Rivals database, how many top 250 players are in Louisiana, do you think? This year?
I don't think there's many. Oh, this year?
Well, 2021.
Top 250. I'll say 3.
There are 7.
Okay.
But when I give you the numbers for the other states, you're going to get it, right?
All right.
Florida, 38. Texas, 35. California, 26.
Yikes.
Georgia, 23. Louisiana, 7. South Carolina, big fat 0, by the way, as we sit here in mid-June.
Yep.
Now let's look at it another way. I always like to look at these things several ways, but if you look at it by the population of the state, who ranks number 1? Georgia, of course. For relative to the population of the state, Georgia has the most in the top 250. Number 2 is California, just ahead of Texas there. And number 4 is Louisiana. And number 5 is Florida. So I guess where I'm going with that was it's likely not going to change. A lot of it has to do with the population numbers in your state, right? The more your population, the more chances you're going to have 5 stars. And LSU doesn't have a big population. Excuse me, Louisiana doesn't have a big population. My point is they're going to have to struggle, go out of state for a lot of these kids, much as Clemson does. 0 in South Carolina. And I just wonder if they can keep it up. Coming off a national championship, sure. But they've got to do that over years and years and years. So I wonder if LSU is going to be able to stay up there. Now, they do have access to the Houston area, which is a really hotbed for college football. It's not too far from LSU. I just wonder how LSU fits in the picture long term and if they're going to be able to hang on. I think if anybody can do it, Coach O has that personality. He can probably do it, at least for several years.
He's always been known as a good recruiter. When he was at Southern Cal and at Ole Miss, he was known as the guy that kind of the glue that kept everyone together. He is going through some personal issues right now, so I don't know if that affects him. You never know. It could be. But I'm looking at their 2021 verbal commits right now, and there are 3 kids from Texas, 2 kids from Louisiana, including a kicker. They got a Mississippi kid in there, a couple Georgia and a Florida. So they are – and a California, I'm sorry. So that's all 11 that they currently have. So, yeah, I guess they kind of are recruiting nationally. I missed Ohio as well. But they are recruiting nationally. But, yeah, you might have a point here. I wish I could disagree with you. And I think I was blinded by the fact that they were so dominant this past year, and of course they're going to get a little boost from that
Right.
being the best team that ever played, whatever we're hearing now. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know. I mean, I still think it's Florida. I don't know if they're still getting the Tim Tebow push or what, but they just always seem to get benefit of the doubt nationally. And I know they're coming back. I know they're gonna probably fight with Georgia, and I may fight with you this year in picking Florida over Georgia. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
And they do recruit nationally. If you look over the last several years in their recruiting, they've got guys from Georgia and Alabama. I say nationally, mainly throughout the Southeast. They're Georgia, Alabama, and let's not forget, Joe Burrow is not from Baton Rouge. He's from Athens, Ohio, and was originally played at Ohio State. So it's just the one team that seemed to be on that list that kind of stuck out to me. The others were kind of obvious, right? All those Florida teams, well, Florida on the list, but all the Florida players. That's no misnomer. There's a huge population in that state and a lot of top 250 guys. And the thing that really stuck out to me was Georgia. You know, Clemson gets a bunch from Georgia, but so does Georgia. There's enough to go around, and Alabama gets some, and LSU gets some, and there's still other guys. So Georgia per capita, and that's the word I was looking for earlier when I couldn't think of it when I was talking about the population. Per capita, Georgia is just throwing out those top 250 guys, and it's kind of amazing. Georgia has 23, and South Carolina has none. Zero.
Yeah, it's a down year for South Carolina, no question.
No doubt. Hey, other recruiting news, a 4-star for Alabama out of IMG Academy. They signed a 4-star, I believe he was an offensive lineman, or he didn't sign him, he actually committed this week. And Oregon got a commit. Tony Franklin, who's the 5th-ranked receiver nationally, second in California. He's second overall in California behind Corey Foreman, the ex-Clemson commit. So that's a huge get for Oregon. And Franklin slightly ahead of Clemson commit Bo Collins, who I think was DJU's teammate that you mentioned last week, who's at number 4 in California. Other things that I wanted to talk about in the recruiting world was the wacky recruiting rankings that we're seeing. We've got Iowa at 9th, and we talked about this a little bit last week, I believe. Iowa at 9th, Minnesota at 10th. And what stood out to me on this list was Rutgers at 14th, and it kind of makes my point from last week. I dug into Rutgers. Now, it's only June. You know, we still got 6 months to go till the early signing day in December. They don't change that. But I dug into this Rutgers group. They're ranked 14th, and they've got 14 3-stars and 6 2-stars, and they're 14th. I mean, I realize a lot of guys are uncommitted, but it's just crazy to think that Rutgers is 14th with 14 3-stars and 6 2-stars.
No, I will tell you, I'm going to get out in front of this. I have a very big soft spot for Rutgers football. And I was the fan when Schiano was there the first time because I was living in Tampa. University of South Florida was actually very good, and they were in the old Big East Conference, and they played each other all the time for seemingly the Big East tournament or Big East championship. And they were great games. Rutgers was usually ranked in the top 10 when Schiano was there. All right, top 15, top 25. But they were ranked. They were good. They were exciting. This state actually loved watching them play. The stadium was full, which it hasn't been in 10 years, 12 years since they've started losing to Howard and other teams. In the Villanova beat them one year. I think Monmouth, some teams that shouldn't have beat them. But I have a soft spot for Rutgers, and I really think that if he can keep the in-state talent in-state, he does have good relationships with these high school coaches that there's not a lot of turnover at the top end schools here, the private schools especially. And they have some brothers, they have some family members. We are in New Jersey, so they got a little bit of family, little crooked nose things going on. So on the staff at Rutgers. So not that I understand your point where it's 3 stars and 2 stars, but if they're not going to win the Big Ten. All right, I'm going out on a limb here. They're not going to win the Big Ten, but they're going to not be the bottom dwellers that they've been. The laughing stock of the Big Ten. When I talk to people in the Big Ten that are fans, and I say, "Yeah, but you play Rutgers 6 times," that may stop now. They may win 7, 6, 7, 8 games maybe in the Big Ten overall, I guess. So anyway, I'm going to be bringing up Rutgers throughout the year. I hope if they keep winning, or if they start winning.
If they don't win through the year, I'll be bringing them up.
Perfect.
Hey, so they'll be on the podcast, right? Unless
they're going to be
on. That's kind of funny.
But I get your point. I'm sorry I did that to you. I went off the rails a little bit there. That's the rivals thing. I actually called out Mike Farrell on Twitter the other day, and I didn't get a response. So who am I? But maybe when we blow up on this podcast, maybe he'll respond to me.
Yeah, and I get it why they're 14. They got 20 commits, and very few teams do. I get it. It's just a little ridiculous, I think. 3 stars and 2 stars, and they're ranked 14th. And this isn't on our script, Beef, but I thought about it as you're talking. Second time around, does that ever work? I mean, Bill Snyder at Kansas State a little bit, but who works the second time around?
Mac, maybe. Mac at North Carolina is a wait and see. I'm not, like I said, I think it's going to work for Schiano at Rutgers just because he had so many great relationships here and he was beloved. And if he didn't have, money in his eyes and wanted to get to the NFL, he probably would still be here. And they would have not been meddling in mediocrity. That's probably being generous for the last 10, 12 years that he's been gone. I don't know if it'll work. But I'm looking at their recruits right now. He's going back to Florida, man. He was that defensive coordinator back in the day for Miami. He's still going back into Florida, going to Clearwater, going to Venice. 2 kids from Tampa. I mean, they're trying to be a national brand too, and he is keeping a lot of kids from New Jersey in state. So we'll see. He's going into Ohio, his old stomping grounds, and taking a 3-star wide receiver. So,
that was going to be my point, Beef. He's not getting the 4 or 5 stars out of Florida.
Not yet. No.
Not yet.
He won't.
Interesting. But there is one Bigfoot in the recruiting this year. And I'm sorry, folks, for Clemson fans that watch and listen to us. It ain't Clemson right now. Ohio State. And this is also something you mentioned last week, Beef. There's 17 5-stars. 6 of them have committed to date. 3 of those are at Ohio State and 1 each at 3 other schools. Ohio State has 79% blue chips plus a kicker, which is, I think, maybe one in history has been a 4 or 5 star. But listen to these numbers for Ohio State. 6 of the top 42 players, 12 of the top 103 players. And when I say 14 of the top 250, that's not giving them enough credit because they actually have 14 of the top 171 ranked players committed to the Buckeyes. Now, I won't give it away, but when we do our predictions on who's going to win the national championship this year, let me just say it's a 2-team race, maybe 3 for me, and one of those teams starts with O. And I see this train rolling, maybe not even just this year, but with these commits, I mean, the Buckeyes are really, really rolling these days.
I'm not sure he's the recruiting coordinator, but all I hear when I read articles about Ohio State recruiting is Brian Hartline. And Brian Hartline played in the NFL, played at Ohio State as well. He's a receiver. All I hear is he's the recruit on record for Travion Henderson, who's a running back, 4-star running back that they got. For Evan Pryor, who's another running back that they got out of North Carolina, who Clemson was in on early. I mean, all you hear is Brian Hartline. How is he not the top recruiter in the country? He might be. And then Ryan Day, I guess, year 2, year 3 that he's going into, maybe he's the closer that no one expected him he was, or maybe it wasn't Herb back in the day. Maybe it wasn't Urban Meyer. Maybe it was these other guys working hard to get kids. And plus, they're good. And, God, I hate saying it, but they are good, and they're going to be fun to watch. And Justin Fields is good. You don't have to like him. He's good, man. And they just reload. They're just reloading.
And they're one of the teams that were on obviously on that blue blood list. And I heard a stat the other day. I think they've had one season that was quote down, and that was like 6-6 in the last 15 or 20 years. They are consistent. And I know the Clemson fans are going to throw 4-0 at me. They do it every time I post a clip against Ohio State, Clemson playing Ohio State, and I probably, contribute to that also as someone who attended Clemson. But that team that we saw play Clemson in late December was ready to roll. Things worked out. Clemson won. Clemson took advantage of the game situation and a call here and a call there. I get it. Clemson won the game, but you can't tell me that team wasn't more physical than Clemson on the field. It looked like to me. And on the edge of being a really, really great team. Obviously, they lost the game. We'll never know. But add, the new recruits that are what they have this year coming back, the new recruits that are in this class, assuming they sign and commit, that pipeline is rolling in Ohio, and I don't see any end to it, to tell you the truth.
No, and to even build on what you were just saying about the game itself, they were as good, if not better, than Clemson that day. And like you said, maybe a call here, a play there. It's a game of inches, as they say. But they were, and we don't see that as Clemson fans. I know this isn't a Clemson show, but as Clemson fans, we didn't see, other than maybe North Carolina last year, anybody close, anybody that could push people back, anybody that was stopping ETN behind the line. I mean, we didn't see that. And then all of a sudden we come out in the first quarter and it's like, oh no, this team is ready to go. They're hitting hard. It reminded me of that first Alabama game in 2015 when that was the hardest that Deshaun got hit by that whole year. It was just like, wow, no, they're not afraid of Clemson. And like you said, Clemson ended up winning the game. Who knows if Ohio State would have put up a better game against LSU than Clemson did? I don't know. You don't know, but they're just continuing on, and they're going to be there. They're going to be there at the
And
end.
as you mentioned, it was just they came out of that game. They went into the game just ready to play, extremely physical. And you're right, that's a good call. It reminded me of that first Alabama game where you kind of go, we better get it together real quick because they came out. And revenge, right? I'm not a big revenge guy. I don't believe in it a lot. But I think if Clemson and Ohio State match up, again, not previewing my preview of the season, but if Clemson and Ohio State match up in that championship game, buckle up, ye old chin strap, because there's going to be some hitting in that game.
And I also think that it also proved to them that, like it did to Clemson in 2015, they're close. They're not that much better than us. So even to Ohio State, it proved to Ohio State, Clemson is not that much better than them. So, like you said, revenge is a dish best served cold, and we may see it this year. I don't know. I haven't thought about a preview yet, but the more I talk about it, and no, I'm not an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, and I'm not Ohio State. I'm not an Ohio State fan either, but I know a good football team when I see one. And the more for this show that I study recruiting, and I start looking at these numbers, and I start going, wow, there's something to this, right? As we said last week, every now and then you're going to find a Hunter Renfrow, and you're going to use that as recruiting doesn't mean nothing. One guy doesn't mean anything. You start stacking up 14 of the top 171 players in a class, that means something. I don't care who you are and what team you play for. That means
the odds are just better. The odds are better that somebody's going to hit, or if they stack up 17 of them, maybe 14 of them hit. That's a difference maker right there.
Right. We're not talking about 1 5-star or 1 4-star here. We're talking about a pile of them. Hey, Beef, we some of these folks might not believe it, but we talk about things outside of sports sometimes. And last week you had mentioned you had watched some live boxing, and that kind of stuck with me. So I was wondering, I went through, I'm a guy who, maybe I'm too old for it, but Netflix to me and Amazon Prime, their bench doesn't seem too deep, right? We're just talking about depth at Ohio State and 14 top 171 commits. You know, you dive into Netflix and yeah, you find a good documentary. I'm a documentary guy, right? So you find a good documentary or two and you find 10 that are crap, right? Or at least in my mind. And Amazon, same thing. I watched some movie Saturday afternoon. I couldn't even tell you the name of it because I fell asleep after 10 minutes, right? So I thought, let me see if I can find a documentary here. And I stumbled across The Good Son, the life of Ray Boom Boom Mancini. It had a 4.9, right? And I said, hey, I know this is my age showing here, but Boom Boom was a thing when I was a teenager and back when boxing was good. And, you know, guys didn't actually just push each other around the ring and hit each other in the private parts, as Parker says. So I watched the documentary on Boom Boom, and it was pretty good. I mean, out of 5, I wouldn't have given it a 4.9. I'd have given it about 4. I guess you can only give it on the round number, right? So I'd have given it probably a 4. I mean, I knew a lot of the story, but I did find out some things I did know, like his brother getting murdered, those type of things. But I knew the gist of the story, and that he was fighting for his dad, who he thought got ripped off when he had to go to war and didn't get a chance to fight for the title. So he seemed like a good son, a good guy overall, and it was a good story. Good boxing show. Then on Sunday, the wife was out, the kid was in the room like teenagers tend to do, right? And you'll find that out. And I ran across it. You know, they do the suggestions. You've watched the good son, Ray Boom Boom Mancini. Maybe you're interested in this. Never works for me, right? All kind of crazy stuff down there that I don't really care about. I saw this movie called, or this documentary called Mr. Calzaghe. You ever heard of this?
No.
Okay. Joe Calzaghe was a super middleweight and a light heavyweight world champion. Never heard of the guy, right? I never heard of this guy. I thought it's Sunday. I'm here by myself. What the heck I got to do, right? This was given 4.4 stars. I'd give it 10.
Wow.
Listen, the whole story was really, really good. He's from Wales. His dad was in a band, which he quit to become his manager. And that never works, right? That never works. Like the coach coming back for the second time. But the cinematography, the fight action, they showed real. In Mancini, there wasn't much of the real action, right? There's a lot of talking and some film. This cinematography filming was so good. They showed slow motion of him getting hit in the face and his, face being distorted all over the place. They had real live interaction in the corner with his dad, just giving him hell. They had the pre-fight hype, with all the other fighters. They had interviews with the opponents. He even sat down with one guy after, and they watched the fight together, watch them fighting each other, and it was great. And they were going like, "Oh man, you hit me there, and I thought I was dead," and so it was just
That's awesome.
really, really amazing. I was on the edge of my seat, and again, I won't give it away, but he was fighting. Last 2 fights, he was undefeated. He was having to fight Roy Jones Jr. and I don't remember the other one, but it was Bernard Hopkins. What am I thinking? He had to fight Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. to stay undefeated. He's got his kids on there, his wife and ex-wife, the whole story with his dad. 5 stars, Mr. Calzaghe. Calzaghe. For those of you out there, I recommend it at least 5 stars. I'd give it 10 if it had 10 stars. Just a great story. And what made the movie was the cinematography, the live action of the fight, slow motion of him getting hit in the face, him getting knocked down for the first time in his career. Just a great story.
I can't wait to watch it. I might do that tonight. I'm definitely gonna hit that because I do remember Joe Calzaghe, and that's when you said Mr. Calzaghe. All of a sudden, I was thinking Karate Kid, but it's still the fight game, right? So I will absolutely check that out. That's awesome. That's really cool. Got me jumping. But there's nothing really. I wrote on our little sheet here that said, "What are you watching? What are you doing? What are you reading?" And I'm reading some books, and very light, because I think with the way that the world is right now, it makes me think and laugh and cry every day. And so I'm doing very light, and I actually enjoy these frat tire books. It's not for Parker, that's for sure. It's called The Average American Male, and it's a very good book. You'll laugh, you'll think. It's a little disturbing, but that's what I've been reading, kind of to get my mind off of what's going on in the world. And not really watching too much TV. I tell you what, with this no sports thing going on, I don't want to hear the same things on ESPN every day, all day, every day. There was a thing the other day with all the commissioners, started watching it, and then next thing I knew, I was playing solitaire on my phone. So obviously it didn't hold my attention. So I'm not doing too much thinking outside of the work hours, and then trying to get some reading and some very, very light reading in. So that's what I'm doing. Not nearly as exciting as Mr. Calzaghe, but maybe next week I'll come with something a little stronger.
Well, it's got I always hate, not hate, but I always am reserved about recommending something, giving it 5 stars, whether it's food or a movie, because it's all in your taste, right? I only mentioned that because you mentioned boxing last week. I thought it was fantastic. Other people obviously didn't. They gave it 4.4, and they gave Mancini 4.9. But I think there's a little American bias in there. He's from Wales, as I mentioned, and only those last 2 fights were against Roy Jones Jr. and Bernard Hopkins were actually in America, and that's part of the story. Is he wasn't thought of as a true champion because he wasn't fighting in America or against Americans. And
it's all coming back as you're saying that. I remember that story.
I'm sure I'd heard of the guy, but I didn't recall his name. And tell you the truth, I tuned out of boxing, a long, long time ago. I used to watch it as a teenager. My brother used to box, and I had some friends who used to box growing up, but I tuned out when once Tyson lost and things started getting crazy, and it became like a hugging match in the heavyweights. It lost its appeal to me. So maybe I missed his whole career, which is really kind of scary. Well, I mentioned earlier the Interesting Jar has $3. Oh, dang it. I just said it, didn't I?
You're calling it what it is. You're calling it by its name. I give you a pass.
The jar has 3. It will have $4 in it. We'll keep that up to date as the year goes on. Casey, we're going to close it up for tonight. We don't have a lot more to talk about. Maybe next week we'll have something to talk about other than how many players test positive for COVID-19.
That would be welcome.
Yeah. I appreciate your time, Casey. And we'll have producer Amy. Why don't you ask producer Amy how we did tonight?
Producer Amy, how'd we do tonight?
I think that sounds pretty good.